I didn't realize a piece of cardstock could change an entire family until I saw what they printed on my grandmother's name tag. And the worst part is, she pinned it to her dress anyway, like she deserved it, like she was supposed to laugh. My name is Caleb Carter. I'm 21, and I'm telling you this because if you've ever been treated like a wallet instead of a human being, you're going to recognize every second of what happened next. That wedding was supposed to be perfect. My cousin Sophie was finally marrying Ethan. The church was full. The flowers were bright. The music sounded like something out of an old movie, and for a moment, I honestly believed we were about to be a normal family again. My grandfather, Henry, had been gone 3 years. Cancer. Quick in the end, slow on everyone's heart. He was the kind of man who never raised his voice unless he had to. The kind of man who made you feel safe just by sitting in the room. After he died, the air in our family changed. Not all at once. More like a quiet leak you don't notice until the whole place smells like gas. Grandma Evelyn was 65. She still moved with this careful grace, like she didn't want to disturb the world. She wore a pale blue dress that Grandpa used to love, and she dabbed on this soft perfume he gave her for their last anniversary. I remember watching her in the hallway mirror before we left. She smiled at herself, small and brave, and I remember thinking, she's trying so hard to make this day happy. At the church, Sophie looked radiant. My dad, Thomas, walked her down the aisle like a proud king. My mom, Diane, dabbed at her eyes and made sure people noticed she was crying. That's a thing she does. She performs emotion like it's part of the outfit. Grandma sat in the front row, hands folded, eyes shining. When Sophie said her vows, Grandma's lips trembled like she was hearing Grandpa's voice in them. I leaned over once and whispered, "You okay, Grandma?" She squeezed my hand and nodded. "I'm good, sweetheart. I'm just grateful." If the day had ended right there, none of this would have happened. But the ceremony wasn't the problem. The reception was. The Westbrook Hotel had this grand ballroom with crystal lights that made everything look expensive even if it wasn't. Guests walked in laughing, collecting their name tags from a long table by the entrance. I was behind Grandma when she reached the check-in girl. The girl smiled, flipped through cards, and handed Grandma a tag like it was nothing. Grandma glanced down. Her smile froze. Not a big dramatic gasp, not a scene. Just that tiny shift in her face like someone quietly slapped her. I leaned closer to see what she saw. In elegant calligraphy, it didn't say, "Evelyn Carter, grandmother of the bride." It said, "The old lady who's paying for everything." I felt heat shoot up my neck. My stomach dropped like I missed a step on stairs. The girl at the table noticed Grandma's expression and said, "Is something wrong?" Grandma forced a smile. "There seems to be a mix-up." The girl leaned in, read it, and her eyes widened. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me check if there's another one." Grandma's fingers trembled. Just a little. She lowered her voice. "It's fine. I don't want any fuss today." And then she pinned it on her dress, right over her heart. I wanted to rip it off. I wanted to march straight to my parents and ask them what kind of cruel joke this was. But Grandma had already turned and walked into the ballroom like she was carrying a weight no one else could see. I followed her, scanning faces, trying to figure out who thought this was funny. People noticed. Of course they did. You can't put words like that on someone and expect the room not to smell blood. I caught a whisper near the bar. "Did you see her name tag?" A snicker. Diane said it'd be hilarious. Another voice, low and sharp. "Apparently she's their personal ATM." I felt my hands curl into fists. I looked across the room and saw my mom laughing too loudly with a group of women. The kind of laugh that says, "I'm in on it. I'm important. Look at me." Grandma stood near a table of flowers, pretending to admire them. Like if she stared at petals long enough, the words on her chest would disappear. Then my dad spotted her and waved like he was calling over a server. "Mom!" he shouted, loud enough for half the room. "Come meet the Andersons. Dad used to golf with Bill." Grandma walked over. Her steps were steady. That's the thing about her. She's steady even when she's breaking inside. My dad introduced her with a grin. "This is my mom." Our walking bank account. Bill Anderson's smile faltered. His wife's eyes flicked to the tag and then away, embarrassed for her. Grandma extended her hand anyway. Evelyn Carter, she said firmly. Henry's widow. Bill took her hand gently. Henry spoke of you often. He was proud of you. Grandma nodded, but her eyes were distant, like she was trying not to cry in public. I watched my dad's face. He didn't see it. Or he saw it and didn't care. When Bill and his wife moved on, Grandma pulled my dad aside. I couldn't hear every word, but I saw Grandma touch the tag. I saw my dad laugh. I saw him roll his eyes like she was being dramatic. Then my mom glided over. Perfect hair, perfect dress, perfect smile. She looked at Grandma's chest and winked. We want everyone to know who's responsible for this gorgeous wedding, she said, like Grandma should feel honored to be reduced to a checkbook. Grandma excused herself to the restroom. I followed at a distance. Not to corner her, just to be near enough in case she needed me. A few minutes later, I saw an older man in a tailored suit step out into the hallway like he'd been looking for someone. He checked a paper in his hand, then looked up and saw Grandma. Mrs. Carter. Evelyn, he said carefully. It's Grant Reynolds, Henry's attorney. Could I have a word? Grandma hesitated, then nodded. I stayed back, but I saw the way Grant's expression darkened when his eyes landed on the name tag. He said something low. Grandma sighed. She looked tired. Grant reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Thick, official, heavy in a way paper shouldn't be. Grandma opened it. Read. Her face went blank. Not shocked like in movies. More like the grief in her finally hardened into something colder. Something clear. She looked up at him. Her lips parted like she wanted to ask a question but didn't trust her voice. Grant nodded once. Slow. Like, yes, it's real. Grandma folded the paper with careful hands and tucked it back into the envelope. Then she turned and walked back into the reception with that name tag still pinned to her dress. But now she wasn't walking like a woman who'd been humiliated. She was walking like a woman who'd just been handed a match in a room full of gasoline and decided to wait before she lit it. The next morning, Grandma sat at her kitchen table in a bathrobe, staring at the name tag like it was evidence from a crime scene. I know this because she told me later. She told me she traced the letters with her fingertip, and she whispered my grandfather's name into the quiet room like he could answer, she said. Henry would have been furious, and then she asked herself a question that haunted her. When did they start seeing me like this? The thing is, I didn't need to wonder. I'd watched it happen in real time. 6 months after Grandpa's funeral, my parents invited Grandma to dinner. They were unusually sweet that night. My mom poured wine like she was auditioning for Best Daughter-in-Law. My dad kept bringing up old memories of Grandpa, as if the past could soften Grandma up like butter. Then dessert came, and the real reason came with it. Dad said, Mom, we've been thinking about remodeling the kitchen. Mom added, smooth as syrup, with tuition and everything, we're stretched. Grandma asked, quiet. Are you asking me for money? Dad smiled too fast. Not asking. Just, Dad left you comfortable. We thought you'd want to help the family. Grandma wrote them a check for $30,000 that evening, and that was the first crack. After that, the requests didn't stop. They grew. A kitchen remodel became a full renovation. Tuition help became luxury cars for Sophie and me when we turned 18. Family vacations became trips. Grandma was invited on and expected to fund. People think being generous is always virtuous, but there's a line where generosity stops being love and becomes a leash. Grandma didn't see the leash at first. She was grieving. She was lonely. She wanted peace. And my parents knew exactly how to use those things. 3 days after the wedding, my parents hosted a post-wedding brunch at their country club. I didn't want to go. I felt sick thinking about that name tag. But I went because Sophie asked me to, and because I wanted to see if anyone felt ashamed. Grandma arrived in a cream outfit that made her look dignified and calm, like someone who still believed in manners even when others didn't. They seated her at the head table, but not next to us. They placed her next to Ethan's parents, people she barely knew, like she was a sponsor, not family. Brunch was polite until my mom tapped her glass. "We want to thank everyone for making the wedding so special," she said. "And of course, a special thank you to Grandma Evelyn, who has been so incredibly generous." All eyes turned to Grandma. My mom's smile sharpened. "In fact, we have an exciting announcement. Grandma will be funding Sophie and Ethan's dream honeymoon to Bali." I saw Grandma's coffee cup pause in midair. She hadn't agreed to that. I knew she hadn't, because I'd heard Mom on the phone with her the day after the wedding, fishing for it with that sweet voice that always hit a hook. Grandma set the cup down carefully. "This is the first I'm hearing of it," she said. The silence was ugly. Sophie's face flushed. Ethan stared at his plate. Dad leaned toward Grandma and whispered, loud enough for people to hear, "Mom, don't make a scene." Grandma's eyes didn't flicker. "I don't recall agreeing to pay for a honeymoon to Bali," she said, steady. "I believe Ethan's parents were originally planning to cover it." Ethan's dad shifted and muttered something about business setbacks. Grandma nodded kindly to him. Then she turned her gaze back to my parents. "I think it's inappropriate to publicly volunteer someone else's money without agreement," she said. "Don't you?" My mom's cheeks turned red. Then she snapped, low and mean. "What about your means? Everyone knows Henry left you more than comfortable." That's when I saw it. The entitlement. Not just wanting help, expecting it. Resenting Grandma for having anything at all. Grandma said, "My financial situation is not up for public discussion, and neither are my spending choices." She stood, smoothed her jacket. "Sophie, Ethan, I wish you happiness. I'll contribute to a reasonable honeymoon, and I'll discuss it privately." Then she turned to leave. I stood with her. "I'll walk you out, Grandma." Outside the dining room, she finally let her hands tremble. She fumbled for her keys like her fingers had forgotten how to be fingers. I asked, "Are you okay to drive?" She took a slow breath. "I'm fine. Just shaken." Then she surprised me. She looked at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. "Come to dinner tonight," she said. "Please." I said yes. Because I needed to know she wasn't alone. And because, deep down, I felt something coming. Like thunder you can smell before it hits. That night at Grandma's house, we ate roast chicken and simple vegetables. Nothing fancy. Just food that felt real, she said. "You noticed the name tag?" I nodded. Everyone noticed. She swallowed hard. "I kept thinking it was a mistake." "It wasn't," I said quietly. "Mom and Dad, they've been talking about your money for a long time." Grandma's eyes sharpened. "What have you heard?" I hesitated, then told her the part that made my stomach twist. I said, "Last week I overheard them talking about your house. Dad said it's too big for one person. He said you should downsize. He said the market is hot and they could help you maximize your investment." Grandma's face went still. The kettle whistled. She poured tea with careful, measured movements, like if she moved too fast, she'd shatter. Then she looked at me and said, "Caleb, there's something I need to tell you." Before she could, the doorbell rang. We looked through the window. My dad's car. Grandma's shoulders lifted, then settled, like she'd made peace with the storm. She opened the door. Dad walked in without waiting. His face flushed with anger. "What the hell was that performance at brunch?" he demanded. He saw me. "What are you doing here?" I said, calm. "Having dinner with Grandma. Something you might try sometime without asking for money." Dad's jaw tightened. He looked at Grandma like she was an employee who'd talked back. "I've had enough of your attitude, Mom," he said, pacing her living room. "You embarrassed us, and now you're poisoning Caleb against us." Grandma sat in Grandpa's old armchair, hands folded, calm voice. "No one is poisoning anyone," she said. "We're acknowledging what's been happening." Dad pointed at her chest, like the name tag was still there. "It was a joke," I said. "A joke doesn't make someone's eyes fill with tears in a bathroom." Dad turned on me. "Stay out of this." I didn't move. "No." Then Dad tried his old tactic. His voice softened into fake concern. "Mom, "You're misunderstanding everything," he said. "We're just trying to help you manage your finances. You're not getting younger." Grandma's eyes narrowed. "I'm 65, Thomas. Not 95. My mind is sharp." Dad's face hardened again. "So what are you saying? You're cutting us off because Diane made one stupid joke?" Grandma said. "I'm saying from now on, I make my own decisions. About my money. About my home." Dad stared like she'd spoken a foreign language. Then he snapped. "Fine. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." When he left, Grandma hugged me tight. "For not standing up sooner," I said into her shoulder. "For letting them treat you like this," she whispered. "You're standing up now. That's what matters." The next morning, Grandma called Grant Reynolds, Grandpa's attorney. She told him she wanted to understand everything Henry left, not just the mysterious paper from the wedding, but all of it. That afternoon, she went to his office. Later, she told me the numbers took her breath away. Grandpa had built companies and sold them at the right moments. Conservative investments, quiet wealth, the kind you don't post online, the kind that sits like a mountain behind the trees. And then Grant explained the document. A codicil, added shortly before Grandpa died. Any descendant who publicly humiliates Grandma is disinherited from Henry's fortune. Not a threat, not a lecture, a condition. Like Grandpa reached from the grave and put his hand on the scale, Grant told her. He wanted them to treat you right because they loved you, not because they feared losing money. Grandma didn't enforce it right away. That part matters, because if she had, my parents would have suddenly become angels. Fake angels. Performance angels. Instead, Grandma did something smarter, something quieter. She reclaimed her life. She reconnected with friends. She enrolled in painting classes at the community center. She started saying no without explaining. She stopped answering calls that were really just demands wearing polite clothes. My parents didn't know what to do with that. They tried the cold shoulder. Then they tried sweet texts. Then they tried guilt. Then anger. Then sweet again. It was a cycle. And Grandma stepped out of it like she finally realized she didn't owe the cycle her oxygen. During those months, I visited her more, and I told her about my dream. I wanted to open a bookstore, not a giant chain store, a small community place, coffee, reading nooks, story time, a space where people could breathe. Most people laughed when I said it, especially my parents. But Grandma didn't. She asked, "Do you have a plan?" I said yes. She said, "Then let's make it real." She didn't just hand me money like a bribe. She invested. She asked questions. She made me work for clarity. She treated me like an adult, and that made me want to be one. 6 months after the wedding, Grandma turned 66. I insisted on hosting a family dinner at her house. She protested. "I don't need a fuss," I said. "It's not a fuss. It's a reminder. This is your home. You're not a guest in your own life." That day, Grandma wore a bold red dress. The old version of her would have chosen something soft, something apologetic. But this dress wasn't apologetic. It said, "I'm still here." My parents arrived right on time, carrying grocery store flowers and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Sophie and Ethan came too. Grant Reynolds came. A couple of Grandpa's old friends came. The room felt warm, but underneath it was tension, like a wire pulled tight. At dinner, my mom noticed a new painting on the wall. A landscape Grandma made herself. "Did you redecorate?" she asked. Like change was offensive. Grandma smiled. "Just a few updates. I've been taking painting classes." Dad blinked. "Painting classes?" Like she'd announced she was joining the circus. I said, "Grandma's talented. She sold 2 pieces at the community art fair." My mom frowned. "Sold? Why would you need to sell paintings?" Grandma's voice stayed calm. "It's not about need, Diane. It's about joy." That word, joy, landed like an insult in my mom's ears. Because joy is something you can't control in another person. Later, Sophie mentioned their honeymoon, the one that ended up being Cape Cod. paid partly by Grandma's modest gift. A sweet trip, not Bali. My mom's smile tightened. Dad's eyes tracked the room the way he always did when he walked into Grandma's house, like he was evaluating what would be his someday. Then the topic shifted to my bookstore. Ethan asked me about it. I started explaining the concept, the location ideas, the budget, I said. It's coming along great. Thanks to Grandma, I've got seed money and the business plan finalized. Dad's head snapped up. Thanks to Grandma? I met his eyes. Yes. His voice rose. With what money? Grandma set her fork down. Gentle. My money. Dad leaned forward. Maybe we should discuss this privately. Grandma didn't flinch. There's nothing to discuss. I'm making my own decisions. My mom stood and cornered Grandma in the kitchen a little later. I didn't hear every word, but I caught the tone. Sharp. Accusatory. Then I walked in and saw my mom's face twisted with frustration. She hissed. Bookstores aren't profitable anymore. He's using you, Grandma said. Quiet. No, I'm supporting his ambition. There's a difference. My mom's eyes narrowed. Thomas and I think it's time you consider moving somewhere more manageable. Sunrise Acres has lovely apartments. Selling this house could help all of us. There it was. Out loud. The plan. Grandma's voice didn't shake. This house isn't for sale, my mom said. Don't be stubborn, Grandma said. Don't be entitled. My dad appeared in the doorway like he'd been listening. He forced a smile, but his eyes were cold. Everything okay in here? He asked. Grandma picked up the cake she baked that morning. Just wonderful. Shall we have dessert? In the living room, with coffee and plates. Dad cleared his throat in that way that always meant he was about to announce something he thought he had the right to announce. Before we move on, he said, Diane and I want to discuss something with everyone. My stomach tightened. I looked at Grandma. She was calm, but I saw her fingers press together once, like a quiet brace. Dad said, We've been concerned about Mom's decisions lately. She's isolating herself, making unwise financial choices, refusing family guidance. The room went still. Even Sophie looked confused. Dad continued, We think it's time to consider a power of attorney arrangement. For her protection. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Not just anger. Disbelief. Grant Reynolds set his coffee cup down with deliberate care. That's a serious step, Thomas. Do you have evidence of diminished capacity? Dad gestured toward me like I was a crime. She's giving away money to fund a bookstore in the digital age. She's refusing sensible downsizing. Grant's voice stayed even. Making decisions you disagree with is not evidence of incapacity. Dad's face reddened. You don't understand. She's always relied on Dad, and then on me, for financial guidance. Now she's being irrational. Grandma stood up slowly. I'd seen her small. I'd seen her sad. I'd never seen her look this tall. She said, Enough. I am not irrational. I am not incapacitated. And I do not need your guidance. Dad snapped. Be reasonable. Grandma's eyes sharpened. I have been reasonable for 3 years. I paid for renovations, vacations, cars, and a wedding. I allowed you to treat me like a walking checkbook. That stops now. Dad shoved his chair back. It scraped loud against the floor. He spat. Is this what you want? To humiliate us? Grandma's voice went soft, deadly calm. No, Thomas. You managed that on your own. Dad leaned forward like he couldn't stop himself. You selfish old woman, he hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. After everything we've done for you, you cut us off? Dad would be ashamed of you. The air turned icy. And that's when Grant Reynolds spoke. Actually, Thomas, he said, your father anticipated this exact situation. The silence that followed was absolute. Dad froze. Mom's mouth fell open. Sophie stared. Grant reached into his jacket and removed a familiar envelope. He said. Henry added a codicil to his will shortly before he passed. He was concerned about how Evelyn might be treated. My mom found her voice first, sharp and panicked. What kind of codicil? Grant looked at Grandma, asking permission without words. Grandma nodded once. Grant said, It states that any descendant who publicly humiliates Evelyn forfeits their entire inheritance. This includes treating her with disrespect, attempting to control her finances against her wishes, or trying to force her from her home, Dad stammered. That's ridiculous. Dad would never, Grant cut in, calm. He did. And as executor, I have been documenting incidents. Then he turned to Grandma. Evelyn, he said gently, I have to ask, do you want to enforce the codicil? All eyes turned to her. I watched my grandmother look at my parents. Their faces were pale now. Not with guilt, with fear. She looked at Sophie, who looked ashamed and small. She looked at me, and she said, Yes, I do. My dad sank back into his chair like someone pulled the bones out of him. Mom whispered, You can't be serious. Grandma's voice didn't waver. I've never been more serious. Grant said, The name tag at the wedding qualifies. The honeymoon announcement at the brunch likely qualifies. Tonight's attempt to declare her incompetent qualifies. Sophie's voice cracked. Does that mean all of it? Grant nodded. The codicil is clear. My dad exploded. This isn't fair. She tricked us. She let us think the money was sitting there waiting. Grandma said, Quiet. No, Thomas. I never promised you anything. You assumed. You took. You demanded. You never once asked what I needed. My mom's voice turned honey-sweet in desperation. Evelyn, surely we can work this out as a family. We never meant. Grandma cut her off. Save it. It's too late. Grant explained what happened next in legal terms that sounded simple in his mouth. Dad and Mom's share was forfeit. Part redistributed. Part returned to Grandma. The rest divided among descendants who showed respect and care. Dad's eyes swung to me like a weapon. I lifted my hands slightly. I didn't know, I said. And that was the truth. Grandma never used this against you. You did that yourselves. Sophie started crying. I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have said something at the wedding. Grandma reached for her hand. We all make mistakes. The question is what we learn. The gathering ended fast after that. People left with careful goodbyes. My parents stormed out without another word. When the door shut, the house went quiet. I helped Grandma carry plates into the kitchen. I expected her to crumble, to finally break. Instead, she exhaled like someone who'd been holding her breath for 3 years. I asked, Are you okay? She looked at me and smiled. Real. I'm better than okay, she said. I feel free. 1 year later, I stood under a sign that read, Chapter 1, my bookstore. It was in a converted Victorian house downtown, with tall windows and warm light that made every shelf glow. There were reading nooks. There was a small coffee counter where my girlfriend Claire served pastries and locally roasted beans. In the children's section, a full wall mural spread like a whimsical forest. Hidden animals, tiny doors, little surprises. Grandma painted it. Twice a week, she led story time. Kids sat at her feet like she was magic. And she kind of was. She still lived in her own home. She kept Grandpa's chair. She kept the garden. But she wasn't trapped there anymore. She traveled. Small trips at first, then bigger ones. She made friends again. Real ones. Not people who smiled because they wanted something. That morning, Sophie walked into the bookstore pushing a stroller, a 3-month-old baby girl with bright eyes and a tiny fist waving like she owned the world. Sophie said, Grandma. Grandma turned and her whole face softened. Hello, sweetheart. Sophie had named the baby Harriet. After Grandpa Henry. A quiet tribute. A way to stitch something back together. Over the past year, Sophie and Grandma rebuilt their relationship slowly. Not with grand speeches. With visits. Phone calls. Honest apologies. Sophie didn't defend her parents anymore. She didn't pretend they were misunderstood. She accepted that choices have consequences. My parents had moved to Florida after their failed attempts to contest the will. Dad took a job with an old associate. Mom complained about the house they had to settle for. Their contact with us was mostly holiday cards and occasional bitter updates through Sophie. Some people call that tragic, but I watched what it did for Grandma. The silence, gave her peace. That day in the bookstore, we sat at a small table while Claire brought coffee and fresh scones. I told Sophie and Grandma about my next idea: adult literacy tutoring, writing workshops for teens, community programs that made the store more than a store. It would mean reinvesting profits, I said. But I think it's worth it. Grandma's eyes shone. It's wonderful, she said. Sophie nodded. It's exactly what Grandpa would have loved. Grandma glanced around the bookstore, the mural, the shelves, the kids' corner. She looked like she was seeing proof that her life didn't end when Grandpa died. It just changed shape. And then she looked at me the way she did the night after the brunch, when she first invited me to dinner. Proud, calm, safe. She said, "This is my family now. Not perfect, not complete, but real." The baby gurgled like she agreed. I leaned back and let myself feel it. Not the revenge. Not the money. The dignity. The fact that a woman who was treated like an ATM became a person again. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, that could never happen in my family, I used to think that too. Until I saw a name tag that told the truth out loud. If you're the one who always pays, always fixes, always keeps the peace, listen to me. You don't have to scream to set a boundary. You don't have to explain your no to people who only understand you when you say yes. And you don't owe anyone access to your life just because they share your blood. Most people wait until they're broken to change. Grandma didn't. She changed while she was still standing. And that is the part I hope you remember. If you're watching from a place where you've been quietly disrespected, where you've been treated like what you provide instead of who you are, I want you to ask yourself one question tonight. What is the smallest boundary I can set that I can actually keep? Maybe it's not answering the call right away. Maybe it's saying, "I'll think about it," and meaning it. Maybe it's moving one step closer to independence, even if nobody claps for you. Because the mistake most people make is thinking boundaries are a punishment. They're not. They're protection. And the people who truly love you won't need a will or a threat to treat you like a human being.